following contains violence, coarse language, and adult situations not suitable for minors. Viewer discretion is advised.
Brutal!
Love to clip that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of The Wandering Tavern. Yes, we did change the name, attempting to make ourselves more palatable to YouTube. We also have new channel art coming, thanks to our good friend Cedar, who is providing that for us. So big thank you to her. She's actually been on the channel a couple times. But tonight we have, I'm guessing you can read the title, the interesting privilege of reading through one, possibly two articles. I did find two that basically are implications that Venom, yes, the alien symbiote that basically lives to destroy Spider-Man and all he loves, is a gay icon.
Yeah, do these articles say that Venom is also non-binary because Venom refers to itself as we?
I think yes, that the second one does. We'll start with the Uprox one because I'm pretty sure it's an interview. Hello, Legacy.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, let me zoom in a little bit here so everybody can read the text. Whoa, that's too much. There we go. I do not have ad blocker on, and I keep forgetting to grab it when.
Womp womp.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is Uprox. I do not know what comes out of this. Presumably, since it's a Hollywood rag, it's probably not good.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, same here. I didn't know about it till I actually looked on Geeks and Gamers, which had an article about this. And it linked this article as the sort of genesis of this rumor. I'm sure we'll get to that, Legacy. very, very sure. If the other article I read was anything to go by. All right, so we begin. In a Venom Let There Be Carnage, there is a scene about midway through where Venom, Tom Hardy, without his host Eddie Brock, also Tom Hardy, attends a rave. At this rave, Venom gives a surprisingly heartfelt speech to everyone in attendance and then goes off on a tangent about how much he misses Eddie. Because the two had just had a bad argument and have, well, broken up. Ask the director, Andy Serkis. Is that actually how you spell his last name? I did not know that. I thought his Andy Serkis was just spelled like, the actual circus.
Nope.
He's significantly less interesting to me now. Like think about it. Your whole last name is circus, as in the place where people go to be entertained and do like shows and acrobats and lion tamers and all that. Spelled like this, and suddenly you're not a circus. You misspelled You misspelled the name.
What, you don't find him interesting? He played Golem. He was King Kong. He was Caesar in Planet of the Apes. Probably the most well-known motion capture actor.
Like I said, just now that I know his name spelled this way, it's just not that interesting. About this scene, and I was surprised. I asked director Andy Serkis about this scene, and I was surprised how forthcoming he was that the party in question was based on an alphabet soup festival. Oh, and okay, I don't know who wrote this first, but sweetheart, you're a professional journalist. journalists. You never begin a sentence with and. And it also doesn't need to be there. Like, Circus is a smart guy who wouldn't, right after saying that, use wording, "This was Venom's coming out party," without knowing exactly what that implies. To make sure I followed up, Circus then goes on to describe Eddie and Venom's relationship as a love affair. He's not wrong, it very obviously is.
Yeah, this is
I
one.
don't know.
This is something about the Venom movies that's kind of bugged me. I'm not overly knowledgeable about Spider-Man lore. Just what I know is just the basics. But as far as I can tell, the symbiote is not actually called Venom. It's just called Venom whenever it's attached to somebody else. Hence why Venom always says we are Venom.
Exactly.
I mean, the symbiote never. When the symbiote was attached to Peter Parker, Peter didn't start calling himself Venom.
Exactly. He's just black suit Spider-Man. But I find this hard to believe because either we're going to equate there's only two ways really I can see this going, and one of them very is not very good. Does not imply a very good relationship. Okay, so the first way this could go is that two people being in a relationship is sort of like freeing. It's like giving up individuality to be a part of, to like giving up some individual characteristics to become to become sort of one being. That sort of thing. But I don't think that's where they're going to go. They're going to try and go there, I think, but I don't think they're going to end up there. I think when they sort of bring in Venom's nature, it becomes, oh, this doesn't sound like a good relationship. This sounds like a toxic one. One where her very much is like, where it's very much bad for every party involved. Circus takes over the direction of the Venom franchise from I'm not even going to try. And it wasn't entirely a secret that F and star Tom Hardy didn't see eye to eye on the movie they were making. And what resulted it was chaos, but very entertaining chaos. So how does Circus keep that on-screen chaos and keep things calmer when the camera isn't on? And now he's got his former War of the Planet of the Apes co-star Woody Harrelson and Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, as Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, and Naomi Harris as Shriek on board her to give Eddie and Venom some trouble. But in the end, we know this movie is about, as Circus says, the love affair between Eddie and Venom. And ahead, he explains, okay, would it not be about the fact that Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, and this new Venom Shriek, I think she's canon, not 100%.
I mean, yeah, she is a villain in the comics.
Yeah. Ow, 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 ow. Here, play with your toy, not my feet.
Like I said, man, wear shoes.
Joe crazy. Also, yes, yeah. Carnage very much regards himself as Venom's son. Depending on who's writing, he is and he isn't. It just depends. I know there are versions of Carnage where he's not Venom's son, he's just another symbiote. And there's versions where Carnage split from Venom and became its own being.
Yeah, and apparently in the Ultimate Comics, Carnage has this really weird ass origin, completely independent from Venom.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. But that's what you get for comics. Like anybody related to anybody else is probably not related to them in a different timeline. And probably had sex together at some point, provided they're, of age. All right. And ahead he explains. So this is a quote from Circus. So I'm trying to get into. Oh no, this is the interview. So I'm trying to get into your mindset a little bit because the first film I don't think was a secret that wouldn't Ruben and Tom didn't always see eye to eye on how the movie should be. But it also strangely created this chaos that worked. So entering this, how do you create a
Dynamic.
a dynamic where on screen it's still chaos, but behind the scenes it's not? It's a very diplomatic way of putting it. Thank you. I tried my best to be diplomatic. No, no, it's great. Wait. No, it's great. Oh, why have you transcribed this way? Like I So look, the thing is Tom and I knew each other a bit have known each other for years and years and years. And have wanted to work together for quite some time, whether it be as actors, whether it was me directing. In fact, he called me before the first Venom and said, "Andy, I'm going to be doing this character, and it's going to be a digital character, and I'm wondering if I could come down to the Imaginarium, which is a performance capture studio, and do some sort of practice with performance capture." And at that time, he was thinking of using it, but then I never heard from him again for a while. And then Venom 1 came out, and I thought, oh, that was the character he was talking about. Oh, well, I'm curious when you saw the first Venom and what was your reaction? It is very unique. Okay, so
Yes, it was really strange having a Venom movie that had nothing to do with Spider-Man.
I'm weirded out by the fact that he didn't actually answer her question. I guess the assumed answer is that that himself and Tom Hardy have known each other and worked together and like can be professional, I guess, and we'll hear about their disagreements like adults, I guess, is the point he's making, but he doesn't really answer the question of how he managed to keep this so-called chaos on screen but not off. It is absolutely, and I think that's the thing. Tom and I have quite similar sensibilities in a way. Definitely swimming in the darker end of the swimming pool. Well, sort of grungy, kind of sort of dysfunctional characters that are outsiders. In fact, the fact that his Eddie Brock is such a confused, mucked up guy, fraud guy. He also has an alien living in him who calls him a loser. Right, exactly that. Okay, again, this harkens back to the sort of like the toxic relationship thing. Like he essentially has a voice inside him that tells him he's like the worst thing ever. Sony is making Morbius. I don't look forward to that. Morbius is tragic, at least in the 90s Spider-Man TV show. That's all I know him from. But he was a very tragic character then, and maybe Sony can pull it off and make him and impart the sort of tragedy of his struggle. We can only hope. All right, so right, exactly that. Right, exactly that. Exactly. In many ways, I think that's why he wanted me to get involved. He phoned me up and said, "Look, we'd really love you to throw your hat in the mix for directing this." Of course, everybody loved the lobster tank moment. That's the touchstone moment. That's sort of the starting point for this next film, and I knew that things had been rocky on the movie. He told me the whole story of differences of opinion and all that. I knew it all, and I know Tom's a very strong-willed actor. Speaking of diplomatic, there you go. Strong-willed. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, he is. And of course, look, and I am too, but there's different ways of skinning a cat. Put it that way, but look, the fact is also we have come some other great forces on this set this time, one of which was Woody Harrelson, and one of which was the cinematographer Bob Richardson. And also, the way I wanted to take this story on, apart from the fact that I inherited it, is a really interesting moment, which is the 7-year itch, the odd couple phase of Eddie and Venom's relationship. I get the opportunity to introduce one of the great Venomverse villains, Carnage, and design that and create that and palette that for that. I just knew I was going to be a shot of it was going to be a shot of red through the entire movie. Also, in terms of visualizing it, the first film is very monotone and dark. I wanted this to be really controlled by the color of Carnage and the saturation of that. And then with Bob, we talked a lot about shooting the CG characters as shallow focused as possible, so they always felt part of the environment and integrated, not overly celebrating them as CG characters because they're quite unforgiving. Their designs are very unforgiving. Okay, so don't know what the lobster tank moment is,
Neither do I.
but so far, nothing is standing out to me. Besides, the voice in his head calls him a loser, kind of thing. All right. Well, it's interesting you said the jumping off point was the lobster tank scene, because that's the point of contention for Ruben and Tom. I don't think Ruben was a fan of that scene. For me, that was the moment the film kind of took off. Uh, boring. All right. You're on the roller coaster ride movie. It sort of doesn't stop for the character moments, and it just becomes exhausting. You want to create the moments where it really, really earned our character moments and character stories and backstories. Okay. Well, yes, because most of the movie is Venom and Eddie arguing, so it definitely has its character moments, but it's always entertaining. Ugh, there we go. All right. Well, no, I think that I can't really talk about the Batman. So during this movie, Venom goes to the rave. That's a very interesting scene. It was originally going to be a carnival of the damned, and it ended up being Tom had gotten to know Little Sims, who's a brilliant rapper and also stars in the movie, and she actually had made a song, unbeknownst to her, called Venom, that connected very much with the first movie. And so Tom got in touch with her. That song became sort of the focus of, well, Tom and co-writer Kelly Marcel were always about Venom coming out and going to a party that was very sort of alphabet soupy, an alphabet soup kind of festival. Really, I'd call it. And so this is his coming out party, basically. This is Venom's coming out party. Okay.
You're not being very inclusive by leaving out the plus.
Regardless of Andy Serkis's opinion, which I think Gigs and Gamers called it right on this, he included the scene for virtue points. That was it. He doesn't actually care. My
Right.
issue is, how does one point to a character that has a completely alien physiology, say you like people of the same gender, queer, intersex, and asexual, I believe is what it stands for, legacy.
What the fuck does queer mean?
It's
But-
either queer or questioning, which, if you're questioning, that doesn't get its own letter. You're gonna be one of these.
Yeah, so if you're questioning, there's a likelihood that you're gonna end up getting kicked off if you come to the realization you're straight.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why? Why is this? But I would ask, why does this need to be equated? Can Venom and Eddie Brock not have a friendship, or having Venom be entirely the parasite that he is? He can't function outside of a living host. Like, Venom species doesn't do that.
Yeah, not to mention I haven't seen the original movie in a long time, but if I remember, it pretty much leaves out the whole part about the symbiotes feeding off of negative emotions, and that led to why Peter got rid of it in the first place,
Yeah, like they
and that's
like
why the symbiote and Venom got along in the comics because they both hated Peter Parker.
why Eddie and the symbiote.
Yep.
Yeah, they had a mutual hatred of someone in their lives. And when Eddie finally does give up the um Eddie at some point gets control of Venom and forces it to basically stop feeding on negative emotions, and anti-Venom is born.
Well, I think anti-venom came from a different symbiote. I mean,
Possibly.
during that time, I think the symbiote would have latched onto the Scorpion, and he became Venom for a while.
Hmm. Well, like well, actually coming out, because that's very interesting. Well, coming out being out. Well, you just compared it to Alphabet Soup. That's very interesting. Well, what is interesting is that it's just like here. He's kind of, if he said it in the movie, we must stop this cruel treatment of aliens. He said, we all live on this ball of rock, and so he inadvertently becomes kind of, he's speaking for the other. He's speaking for the freedom of the other. But that's not in fitting with Venom's character, because Venom doesn't care about anyone. He has one singular goal, and that is to feed off the negative emotions of those around him and cause as much chaos and destruction as he possibly can, thus generating more negative emotions. And then why is he just, we must stop this cruel treatment of aliens. We all live on this ball of rock, on this ball of rock. What do you mean? No, you don't. You crash landed. Like, I remember that one of the key things in the trailer is that Venom crash lands on Earth. It's not like aliens are a common thing. And we know this isn't attached to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So aliens aren't a common thing. So are you making a point that gay people are all illegal aliens? And it's very obvious that Eddie and Venom are in love. Like, we all know that they're in love.
How so?
Yeah, that's a good question. How so? How do you justify that claim? That's a very bold claim. Absolutely, they do love each other, and that's kind of the center of the movie, is that love affair, that central love affair. Or no, I don't buy that. So that's Andy Serkis's take, I guess.
Yeah, sounds kind of
Apparently, because
just pulled out of his ass.
yeah, it's very clear I would believe it. I would believe that would be a joke, but I think Geeks and Gamers had it right when I read through their article today, and I think they called it right, Joe. It was just the scene is just there, both probably as a joke, but also as, hey, look, we're virtuous. We we have the virtue. We believe in the progress of progress. Like, Nostalgia Critic did this joke, and as much as I think the man is, as Doug Walker is not, you know, the most morally upstanding human being, I still think he got it right when he reviewed Princess Diaries 2, and there's just a scene where everybody's scrolling through princes that want to marry Mia, and one of them happens to be gay, and they're just like, right on, like, yeah, we're virtuous, we support the gays. But okay, congratulations. This is the thing, nobody cares,
I
and the
mean,
people that do care, or you really aren't worth listening to. All right.
I mean, without knowing the context, it sounds like the whole thing is just meant to be nothing more than a joke. Like them having almost like them bickering like an old married couple. I mean, a lot of fictional characters do that.
Yeah. Anyway, this is the second article. Well, damn, it's probably going to be a short episode today. Unless this is long. All right. Venom, Let There Be Carnage is coming out to theaters October 1st, and no, that's not a typo. Oh. The filmmakers have teased that the upcoming sequel to 2018's Venom is focused on non-traditional relationships and love.
Well, it
Um,
is definitely non-traditional. It's an alien parasite.
yeah. The trailers for so far. Ugh, Jesus. And editor, just read through your work, people. That's all we ask. The trailers so far have shown the alien symbiote and his human host Eddie Brock entering a new phase of their relationship. They don't have a they don't they don't have a relationship. This is the problem with giving really Venom, the symbiote as a character, a personality outside of attaching itself to to someone else. Like, the reason Venom is as aggressive as he is because Eddie Brock is a very angry individual. Like, he attached himself to someone who was very angry, he unbalanced, emotionally unbalanced, I would say. So this is one of the things that I think Venom actually missed out on. Instead of having the symbiote attached to itself and become sort of this dark manipulator in Eddie Brock's head, actively turning up his anger, his self-hatred, like, to the extent where he actively lashes out and allows the symbiote to take him over. We instead made Venom a character unto himself. So he has a personality, he has quirks. He has quirks and personality and does things that are funny. meaning that now we have to examine them as two beings separate from one another. The problem is when you really begin to examine their relationship, Venom outside of Eddie Brock doesn't have personality. He doesn't have quirks. He's a little ball of black goo, basically. Like even at the end of the movie, when he attaches himself to Eddie's love interest at the end of the movie, he still retains the personality he presumably leached off of Eddie Brock instead of acquiring quirks and from, the first personality. Yeah. All right. So where was I? Oh, yes. The first movie covered the hate each other on first sight, form an uneasy alliance to defeat a mutual enemy phase. We've all had that meet cute, right? No. Oh, this sort of thing really only happens in bad romance novels and fan fiction. Generally, people who don't like each other on sight. Generally, people who don't like each other don't end up in very stable or happy relationships. Just at a guess. If you have such vehement disagreements with another person, that you cannot physically stand the sight of them, adding a relationship to that seems like a terrible idea. Now the two have settled down in the aftermath of the first. Usually, yes, legacy. So with Venom attaching himself to some psychos, he sort of has that inherently malicious and crazy personality.
Yeah, I thought in the comics that Peter was the first one to get the symbiote. Like he got it while him and the Avengers were out in space.
I guess it depends on what continuity. Now the two have settled down in the aftermath of the first film's conflict, and their arguments center around how they will coexist on a daily basis as the relationship appears to be permanent. All right, fine. If this sounds like romance, don't worry, you're not reading my fan fiction, not today at least. Director Andy Serkis recently said as much in his production notes for the film, reportedly by Comic Book. Serkis said, quote, "The film is a love story, but not the love story you might think. It's very much about the extraordinary relationship between symbiote and host."
So
But
it's not
that's,
the love story you'd think it is. If you say
yeah.
it's a gay romance, that counts as the love story you might think.
Oh, I thought it remained zoomed in. Hold on. How's that look? That's better. There we go. Now we can all read. But again, like symbiote and host, they're not boyfriend, girlfriend. They're not like their relationship is to the extent that one literally feeds off the other.
Yeah, basically, it's like loving a best friend that's attached to you.
Yeah, it's like they're basically Siamese twins. They're forced to be together. Or not out of any sort of mutual like mutual attraction or mutual. Yes, exactly. It's a parasitic relationship, which again begs the question why these people keep comparing it that way. Keep these comparing these two to gay relationships.
I
Unless the Hollywood media outlets are attempting to say, "Hey, you know those gay guys who who exist, they're all in horribly parasitic relationships. They actively harm each other. It's a bad thing to be gay.
I mean, I imagine a lot of these leftist journalists probably have been a part of a lot of toxic relationships, and that's probably what they know.
I don't disagree with that. It explains why, but I think I have a thing to do at the end. I want to finish the article first, but I'll talk about it. The film is a love story, symbiote and host. I don't think symbiote is to imply that he's I mean, yes. Just about, yeah. But symbiote and host is just a weird way. Any love affair has its pitfalls, its high points, and its low points. Venom and Eddie's relationship absolutely causes problems and stress, and they have near hatred for each other. Okay, again, we're setting this up as, oh, they don't like each other, but they have to be with each other. They can't live without each other. Jesus Christ. Like this one line puts the worst type of light on this relationship. These two lines. Venom and Eddie's relationship absolutely causes problems and stress. They have a near hatred for each other. They don't like each other. But they have to be with each other. They can't live without each other. This sounds like a goddamn abusive relationship. And I'm not sure who's the victim in it. You could definitely make the argument that Eddie Brock is the victim. He's forced to be with the symbiote. He's forced to host Venom. Venom constantly causes problems with his life. If that's companionship, love, the things that that relationships are really about, I don't Jesus Christ. So we're going to say, and this is still a quote from Andy Serkis, by the way, that a near hatred for each other, but that the fact that you can't live without each other. So so your grandmother, yes, it is. It is extremely homophobic. But my concern is they've now couched just about every this one paragraph has done almost irreparable damage to the idea of on-screen homosexual relationships. Because now that the virtue signaling is saying, hey, they they need to hate each other but can't live without each other, kind of thing, is going to create some horrifying implications for relationships in the future. You know how we looked at Bella and Edward's relationship from stepping back from the whole, we're reading it and saying that's kind of toxic. That's kind of an abusive relationship. Would yeah, we're experiencing the same thing here. This paragraph describes an abusive relationship, and I agree with you, Joe. I don't think Andy thought it through like that. I think he's not. I don't think he's being homophobic or anything like that. I think he just didn't really think this relationship out to what he was its logical end point. He expanded this in an interview with Uproxx, which we've already read, going as far to frame it as the core theme of the film: they do love each other, but they have a near hatred for each other. That makes sense. But it also this one line also discolors relationships as a whole. In like, this one last sentence is colors relationships as a whole, not just same sex relationships, but all relationships, as you can't stand each other. If you can't stand who you're with, then it's not a real relationship. As if by some metric, being happy and having someone that, yes, you're going to fight, you're individuals, there's no getting around that. But having someone that you cannot stand the sight of, or having a near hatred of another person, that's what love is to these people. That is the entirety of the context that Andy Serkis gave, and I don't think this is intentional, mind you, but I think it's not very well thought out.
Yeah, I mean, it works for a comedic effect, but but don't think of it as like like an actual representation of a good relationship on screen.
Mm-hmm. That central love affair. In a pivotal scene, Venom attends a rave separately from Brock. He ends up giving a speech to the crowd about alien-human relations. According to Serkis, he says in the movie, "We must stop this cruel treatment of aliens." Okay, so we've been here before. And so he inadvertently becomes he's speaking for the other. He's speaking for the freedom of the other. Venom taking on racism makes about as much sense as anything else that happened in the last year, so why not? Yeah, just I guess we're bringing racism up apropos of nothing. I mean, sure, I'll address that as well, but I think we're more focused on the fact that Venom and Eddie are gay for each other, apparently. I think the author is, because Circus's quote ends, "He's speaking for freedom of the other." So other can mean just about anything, but the author is like, it's racism. But before he can finish putting the "I have a dream" speech to shame, wow, Jesus. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. There's been a lot of hubris to come out of Hollywood. I think this might top it all. Jesus Christ. That's fucking insane. Venom rambles on a tangent about Brock. He's clearly upset they have just had a fight and basically broken up. It is a turning point in the movie where Venom realizes his love for Brock, says Serkis. Tom and co-writer Killer Marcel were always about Venom coming out and going to a party that was very sort of alphabet soupy. So that's just a quote from his interview. All right. So the idea of Brock and Venom being in a relationship isn't necessarily new. Venom's own comic series featured a story arc where the two became parents. Weird.
I mean, parents to Carnage.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the comics to say one way or the other, but this seems weird. Like, yes, if it's in reference to Venom and Eddie birthing Carnage, then I would not look on that as they're becoming parents. The film doesn't seem to be going quite quite there yet, but at least we're getting a coming out party where no one actually identifies as queer. In the meantime, if you're looking for some man on symbiote action that is less metaphorical and more Tom Hardy getting to know that prehensile tongue, stay tuned for my fan fiction.
No, thank you.
Nah, I'm good. I might actually watch Peacemaker now.
Why? Because he. Wait, you want to see John Cena kiss a dude?
Yes. Look, John Cena was teenage Clayton's like end all be all.
All right. Yeah, man.
There's also the 5 Venoms, and one of them is Scream. Like, is it maybe like Eddie Brock Venom destroys something and finds a small child, and Eddie manages to convince him to like, hey, let's take them home? Like, what is this? Like, I'm curious, I guess. But really, like, this whole having. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, close that. All right, so tune in for me going on a rambling rant. So a couple of years ago, back at the beginning of 2020, Short Fat Otaku put out a video about the New Guy comic. If you don't remember the New Guy comic, it's the comic where some blue hair is laughing at the fact that PewDiePie got robbed, and a new guy comes into her workplace and is like, "What are you laughing at?" She's like, "Oh, the millionaire gamer bro got robbed." It's like, "Well, you shouldn't be laughing. That you wouldn't like that if that happened to you." He's like, and she basically brushes him off and tells him, "No, you're an idiot. Fuck off, and we're not going to be friends."
Yeah, that was a great meme. The new
Yes, it
guy.
was.
They made the new guy so fucking wholesome.
But the that was the springboard for him talking about the left's identification with evil. Well, and the thought occurred to me this week as I was, doing my work, which proves how hard my job is, because it takes a lot of thought. But as I was doing my work, I thought about, the sort of identification with villainous characters that the left has. And not to the extent of, oh, he's the villain, but I understand, not in the way of Thanatos, where you can, or Thanatos. Yes, the ancient Greek god of death. No, Thanos, where you sort of understand his mentality, you understand where he's coming from, you sympathize with him. You understand his end game and why he's doing this. You just don't agree with it. I mean, like, looking at these characters and saying that is the best character ever. He is perfect and redeemable, and he can be, and I want to hug him. And this is something that the left hat does a lot. Like
Magneto, Killmonger.
Magneto is one, Killmonger, but even earlier, like Jafar was a Disney villain that a lot of people said, yeah, he's cool. Well, like, and it got me thinking, like, okay, so why do these people identify with these villains so much, and why do they sort of push their attributes onto them? And while I think Otaku had it right with it's a tribal thing, you know, I would also say that in reality, it's that the villains don't ever have to work for what they want. I mean, obviously, they have to work to reach their goals, but they never grow. They never change. Jafar is a villain throughout all of the Aladdin movies, in which he appears, but he never changes. His plan is always either revenge or um his plan is always either revenge or grabbing power. That's it. He doesn't grow, he doesn't change, he doesn't learn anything. There is no self-improvement on a villain's part. And I think that's a lot of what people seem to sort of cling on to. What these Tumblrites that have grown up and gotten jobs in media and writing is that they hold on to that idea that if a character changes, that's a bad thing. Self-improve, like the rejection of self-improvement is, I think, one of the is a contributing factor in this idea. The idea that I'm perfect the way I am, and anyone who disagrees with that is obviously evil. And I mean, do you think, and as we sort of push for villains with more complex motivations and more backstory and all that, you begin to sort of look at them and like, okay, so you're doing this, so you think you're the hero in this story, huh? And just on my examination, that's what I've found, sort of this idea that it oh, villains don't ever have to change. They can stay the same throughout everything. They can stay the same. They don't have to change. We don't have to improve. We don't have to be better, or because as the next movie is going to come along and I'm just going to show up and I'm going to defeat the bad guys and be defeated, and that's okay. I think, Joe, I think you're also correct. Like the whole outsiders, the whole edgy outsider thing is also probably a contributor, but I think less so than the idea that one needs to improve themselves. But yeah, that's just thoughts that have been rumbling around in my head for the week. But that's all I really had, so oh, I was right. It is a short one. Normally we go for 2 hours. Jesus. But they were relatively short articles, and we didn't have much else to. We didn't have too much to add, except to point out, like, hey. And the moment that anyone like if Tom Hardy comes out, or anyone in the movie comes out, or it turns out like one of the side characters that Venom kills was gay, they're gonna be, hey, oh, what a betrayal! They did the
Yes,
same
I
thing with
know.
it.
Yeah, and Halloween.
Yeah, like
Yeah, the bad guy did a bad guy thing. Imagine my shock.
the bad guy doing bad guy things hurt someone of the same tribe as us. Yes. Bye.
I think a similar thing happened with well, similar happened with Chucky. But so there was the new Chucky series.
Yep,
So
I heard.
the protagonist of that series is gay, and Chucky tries to basically play the part of a queer ally. And so people are like, "Oh my god, he's an ally." But then I'm just thinking like, "No, Chucky's clearly manipulating the kid. The kid's
Yeah,
very insecure with himself, so it's naturally Chucky's trying to lower his guard
manipulate him to kill
because Chucky does that does that in the movies.
because Chucky can't move. I think is
Well, I mean,
no.
he can move, just can't do it when he just won't do it when a lot of people are around because he'd blow his cover.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's all we've got for tonight. We should be back next week. I don't see why we wouldn't be, unless something unexpected comes up. So we should be back next week. We'll most likely, unless something new comes to our light, back reading the Sith Resurgence, which I
Oh
look
boy.
forward to reading. I do. It will be awful, and there needs to be drugs, probably.
That is your decision, and I will respect it.
Like when National Neuralities talked about the buried your gaze trope. I'm not necessarily a believer in that trope. I know it probably does happen, or at least it did in older media, but I have a hard time looking at modern media with how virtue signally Hollywood actually is and saying, yeah, the buried your gaze trope is still happily in effect.
So, what is the buried you guys trope?
Basically, it is the trope that if a character is gay, eh, they will um they will go and they will die at some point in the show.
I've never heard of. I can't think of a single movie that does that.
Supposedly the 100 did it, but I mean only if you go by the loosest definition,
I
which
mean,
the
does it?
leftists are want to do.
So does it? It counts only at. So it just has to be a gay character dying. Doesn't matter if they're an extra or a main character.
If they are if they are a gay character in in and they die because and they're killed off, it is presumed that it is because the network execs said gay isn't testing well, so she dies. So we're getting rid of that character.
Yeah, it sounds bullshit. I mean,
I agree with you,
if they
Legacy. Modern entertainment does suck.
oh, it just means we as people, we as the consumers have to be the ones who start making good stuff. I mean, just look at young Rip of 59's trying to make his own comic book universe.
Yep.
He's given up on Marvel and DC and just the mainstream comic industry as a whole. So he's doing his own thing.
Yep, and that's what'll happen eventually. But for now, we have what we have, and the best thing we can do is support those that are creating their own stuff and ignore who are creating their own stuff and completely and totally ignore the whole um just don't give your money to things um like Disney movies, the new Disney Marvel movies, basically.
Yes. Don't give your money to people who keep making crap.
Yeah. Thank you for articulating the thing I could not. I saw this and I didn't want to address it because I thought it was kind of silly, but it might be worth it. Are we talking about their most recent campaign? Because that was a big deal. One of the characters died in like the first 3 episodes, but that was it was intentional.
Oh yeah, I guess I did something like that too when I hosted a D&D campaign back in college. One of the characters I played was gay, and he ended up dying during the final session. But I only did that to raise the stakes. Somebody had to die.
So that might be something interesting to talk about. Because I was at one time a fan of Critical Role. The first campaign is still the best. I think it was when they were in top form.
All right, is that all for
Huh.
today?
Yeah, that's gonna be it. I'll look into it, Joe, and if I think it's interesting enough, we might cover it next week. But until then, uh, y'all enjoy your evening.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks for coming by. Hey, tavern's closed. You don't have to go home. You can't, but you can't stay here. Good night.